We have a new edition of Warhammer 40,000, which means, of course, we need new starter sets. Get those old sculpts out of here. It's time for the new stuff. Time to say goodbye to Necrons, and hello to Tyranids, and randomly, also hello to a new Warcry Starter Set. Obviously, Warcry's got nothing to do with 40k, but it's interesting that they've revealed these two starter sets basically back to back, one day after the other. And we're going to start with the 40k ones because those, I reckon, are probably going to be the ones that you lot are going to find most interesting. And I do have a question for you, right? I've got a question when it comes to these starter sets because there's something that is confusing me just a little bit about how Games Workshop approaches the proper starter sets. The one that you're supposed to buy to get the models and the paint and the brush, all of that sort of thing. We've got the introductory set, which comes with paint, we've got the starter set, and we have the ultimate starter set, which is something of a departure from the previous version, which had like recruit something and commander, I think it was. They've just made it a little bit more simple this time round, which, to be honest, makes sense, because if you want starter set and ultimate starter set, you know that both of them are suitable and that one of them is just bigger than the other. I think this is probably a more sensible way to name these things. I mean, it's great if you're looking for recruit stuff, if you already know what all of this stuff is, but as a completely new player, a completely new convert to the franchise, you probably want something that's a bit more easily passable, right? Now here is where I ask a question that you might have the answer to, although you also might not. If you're doing an introductory set with paints, firstly, surely you would want to provide more than one brush. They always provide one brush, but I would argue that most people would find it more, just find it easier to have two. And let's be honest, these starter brushes are not exactly top of the line, sable-tipped, incredibly handmade, doesn't even make sense. But you know what I mean, they're cheap as hell, so maybe chuck another one in just for ease of use for people who are just starting to paint. Just a thought. The other thing that I continue to be surprised by is how they put base colours in these sets, because one of the big things about contrast paints, something that Games Workshop pushed super hard, is that it allows you to get a decent finish with very little time or indeed experience. Now, I don't want to give anyone any ideas here, but I would also argue that Citadel Contrast is a much more recognisable brand name than just Citadel Colour. Everything has colour, all paints have colour, but not all paints are called contrast. Only Games Workshop's specific kind of speed paint type paints are called contrast. And also I'd think that probably contrast would be an easier route for a lot of beginner painters. I know that if you want to get a full army banged out in no time at all, which is supposed to be on the strengths of that range, I mean, that would be a great way to introduce someone to getting to that 3-colour minimum that Games Workshop encourages. And you can get that with the paints they provided here. I mean, it's not as if they provided no colours, but they've also provided only base colours and not everything that you need to make your models look like they do on the box. Now, obviously, if you replaced those 5 base colours with contrast colours, then, I mean, in a way it wouldn't work because you would need at least one base colour, but it just surprises me that they haven't just stuck a base colour in there that is compatible with contrast as a whole, done a red contrast, a purple contrast, a black contrast, then you could have a gold in there too, and it would functionally work pretty much the same, except it would be a lot easier for new painters to actually use. And I suppose you could also argue that you're not setting them up for a true painting experience. That's not how they're going to experience dealing with other paints. But again, just from a marketing standpoint, I'd have thought that having people really into using contrast would be a sensible way to go. But there's probably a very good reason as to why they haven't done that I don't know, because I'm not Games Workshop. All I know is that trying to get people to paint a bunch of gaunts straight off the bat is akin to torture and should be punished. So as they say, it's 5 Infernus Marines, 10 Termagants and a Ripper Swarm, all push fit, so no glue required, which is good. Clippers, starter brush, just the one, and 5 paints to get you started, making it the perfect intro for new Warhammer hobbyists. You've got to introduce them to the tedium of batch painting armies quickly. The Termagants is the best way to do that, as we know. And obviously the introductory handbook, so that there's guides and background information on the models, plus an intro to the game and so on and so forth. it's actually pretty good. Don't get me wrong, for all my questions about paint choice and painting termagants, it's still a good idea and it's still a great way to get someone into it if they don't really know what they're doing. Now, the starter set I think is going to be the most popular one, mostly because it's going to be super cheap compared to buying all of this stuff separately, and if the current starter sets are anything to go by, it's probably going to be hilariously cheap compared to just buying a box of Terminators, because you'll be able to sell everything off and basically end up with free Terminators. So expect to see that all over eBay as soon as this thing goes live. Load of gaunts, 5 Terminators, 5 Infernus Marines, a Terminator Captain, you got the Winged Prime, you got the Leapers, and the Neurophage I think it's called down there. It's a decent little box, it's a decent little set. The lack of terrain is a little bit... I don't know if you can even use the box as terrain like you could with the previous starter sets. It doesn't seem to suggest that, which is a bit of a shame. But other than that, we've got the reference sheets and it looks like it's going to have a proper handbook in it, so it is what you kind of need to get started. And it's the Psychophage, not the Neurophage. What am I thinking of that's Neuro? The Neurotyrant is probably what I'm thinking of. And we were close. We got nearly all the miniatures. I just ignored the 2 Hungry Ripper Swarms, which is entirely on me. You can't ignore the little lads. Finally, there's the Ultimate Starter Set, and this one is so much more attractive than the previous one that it kind of feels like the main reason that the previous one exists is to make you look at it and go, yeah, I could get the starter set, but if I get the ultimate set, then I'll get scenery too. Is that an overly cynical thing to think? I don't think it's that cynical. It's a decent looking box. You have actually got some nice looking scenery in there. You've also got an additional librarian and the... what were those lads called? The Barb Gaunts, maybe? I'm sure it'll tell us as soon as we scroll down. Makes it kind of pointless guessing, doesn't it, really? I mean, for my money out of the starter set and the ultimate starter set looks infinitely more attractive because it has got scenery, which just makes it look more interactive as a whole, and that is, of course, probably entirely what they're going for. So it's going to be more expensive, obviously, but it's also probably going to look like better value compared to the previous box because of the extras that you get within it. Yeah, so what was in the previous one, plus Librarian, Terminator Armour and the Barb Guns. Also providing full combat patrols on either side, which is another way of kind of making this one better value. And that, to be honest, is a really good move because that is going to make it look like even better value because you're not just getting an introduction to 40k, but there's also combat patrols now are their own like distinct thing. You can have combat patrol versus combat patrol, and allegedly they are all balanced to have a good match between all of them. It's like its own separate thing along with 40k, but it's also 40k at the same time. So actually having combat patrol missions that you can then play using this box, especially if you split it with a friend, you're like, oh, well, we're not just getting the scenery, we're not just getting these armies that we can play against each other with, but there's also a fully like fledged game mode that we can use them for as well, which, again, compared to the previous version, even though it says start here in red at the top, well, technically in white on a red background, I feel like this one is going to look more attractive to a good number of people. Get a bigger, badder book, 72-page the Ultimate Handbook. I mean, you want the Ultimate Handbook to contain information on everything, in my opinion. Literally everything, even things not 40k related. Random facts, that'd be good. Plus the core rules booklet that provides the full core rules, as well as combat patrol rules and all 6 combat patrol missions. So, yeah, I mean, they want you to buy this one. They want you to buy this one, of course they do. Now, of course, the big question of the day is what's happening to the old stuff in the old starter sets? Where are those Space Marine models going? Because we do technically have them available on separate release, but they're sort of different sculpts than the ones that are widely available, so are those going to just disappear? Or are we going to see some sort of combat patrol based around that old stuff, like the Indomitus specific models? I kind of wouldn't be surprised, honestly. It would be a way to recycle them, to bring them out again. It would mean that people who haven't got hold of them up until now but always wanted them will then have an excuse to buy them because, let's face it, that's a thing that happens. I know I'm guilty of it. I know that you are guilty of it as well, where you want a model, you don't buy the model because you don't really need the model, but you do like it and you do want it, and then it looks like that model's going away, and then it disappears, and then it comes back, and you immediately go, well, I've got to get it now, and then you end up buying it for more than it would have cost you to just get it in the first place, and I'm having some horrible realisations about myself right now that I think I'd just like to move on from, to be honest. So move on we shall. The Warcry Starter Set. Vampires battle Stormcast Eternals in the Crypt of Blood. You will recognise these miniatures because these are Underworld warbands, and they've been repurposed and used for Warcry, which is an interesting way to do things. However, I will say straight off, I love this idea. This is great. So, quick to play, streamlined rules, and it's like, what, half the size of what you would normally play for a Warcry game? Like, the warbands tend to be around 10 plus models. And these are obviously a lot smaller than that. But you know what? I think this is a great idea. We already have starter sets for Age of Sigmar. We already have starter sets for Warhammer 40k. Just because Warcry is, by its very design, a smaller game, doesn't mean that it should therefore be exempt from having a smaller starter set to get people into it. Now, I've already seen a few people, not happy about this, comments that kind of say, well, there's no point having this, oh great, it's so small, it's too tiny, it's not big enough. And the thing is, on the one hand, yeah, a full game of Warcry is going to be more complex than what this provides. But if you want to get a starter set in Warcry, the last one they did was the Nightmare Forest or something. Nightmare Quest, that's it, Nightmare Forest. Close enough. I mean, it's in the Gnarlwood. It's practically exactly what I said. I'm revising my disgust at myself. No, that was fine. What I said, totally legit. That was like £110, right? That is an investment. It's an investment to get involved in that. That is quite a lot of money for one person. It's still quite a lot of money for two people splitting it. And what you do get is the full game. You get scenery, you get the board, you get 2 warbands, which is great. You also get the rules. However, if you don't want to plump up for that, if you don't want to chuck cash at that on the basis of, well, this looks kind of cool, shall we try it? It's a lot of money to just try it. Whereas something this size, something this small, something that is going to be quicker to play, easier to assemble. I mean, these are push fit. I think I've got the vampires around here somewhere. Oh, they're in the pile of we'll pretend I didn't say that. This is a good idea. Just because the game itself of Warcry is on a smaller scale than Age of Sigmar or 40k, doesn't mean that it won't also benefit from having an easy route in, a cheaper route in. In fact, I don't know why it would be an issue that Games Workshop are trying to scale it down to make it more attractive to new players. To be honest, if you tried to get me to play 40k now by sitting me down in front of a 2,000 point game, I would not have the time or patience to learn something like that. I would not be in for that. I would go, oh dear God, how long is this going to take? Because, frankly, I'm no longer a teenager with all the time in the world, which is when I was introduced to 40k. I was introduced by basically experiencing a full game. I'm not having that now. Funnily enough, I've got stuff to do. I don't have time for that. Whereas, something small, something reasonable, something streamlined, something quick, where you get the basics of the rules, you get the basics of how the game interacts with terrain, on a smaller scale, then you go, okay, we've blasted through that, didn't take very long, I feel like we've got a good feel for this. Oh, it says here that what you do is expand the amount of terrain you've got. Okay, great, we can try that. This is a good idea. This is a good idea. It's also a recycling of Underworld's warbands, which I wasn't really expecting, but I'm kind of okay with, because both of the Underworld's warbands that are being included in this box are solid. We've got a little bit of purpose-made scenery, which is nice. Overall, I just think this is a good idea, you know? So it comes with a 72-page book that has the complete core rules for the game, alongside lore for both warbands if you're interested in that, and 7 battle plans designed just for the box. A nice self-contained smaller version that still has the rules for the wider game and a larger version of the game that you're getting. Perfect. Also, look at this. Expanding into the wider game is easy, as every faction's compendium of fighter cards are available to download for free right here. Wait, GW. Wait, are you telling me that if you provide faction rules for free, it makes it easier for people to get into the game? Really? Oh, I had no idea. If only that was something that was available for other systems that you make. Alright, look, I know technically right now the 40k stuff is free, but it's not going to be forever, is it? So the point still stands, and the AOS stuff isn't. So there. Don't come at me. Don't you do it. So there you go, starter sets for days, 3 for 40k, 1 for Warcry, and I'm in favour of pretty much all of them, even if the ultimate starter set is clearly going to be generally better value than the other two. But then again, that's how these things always work, and that's how they get you. They get you in cheap, and then you go to buy a Land Raider, and it's £65, or it's £75, or 70. Too much either way. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you thought of all of those in the comments down below. Thank you very much to my YouTube members and patrons who are seeing this early, which you could do as well if you wanted to. It's totally up to you, but you can have a look. Let me know what you think of all that in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things Patreon, videos, subscribe, and I will see you for the next one. Oh, and there's an affiliate link. What a terrible outro.